Welcome to Alpha Wolf Trading. Did you know that there's over 12,000 stocks or companies that trade on the OTC? Between the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, you have over 7,000 companies. But us as retail investors, we wouldn't know that unless we were researching. Because why? Wall Street focuses on the elite, the big companies. And where the retail investor has their advantage is in small and microcap stocks. Why? Because you have the opportunity to speak directly with leadership. That is what this is all about here at Alpha Wolf Trading. We're trying to find the hidden gems, and we interview the executive teams of companies that we think meet the parameters to be those hidden gems. I also want to make sure you understand that this is not a paid for promotion. I collect no compensation for the interviews I do here. These companies that I interview have been identified as potential opportunities for me and the members of Alpha Wolf Trading to receive a higher than average return on our investment. These companies I have identified either because of a technical setup on a chart, a fundamental change within the organization, new management team, new products, all kinds of different things that actually lead me here. But what do I think is the most important? Leadership. And that is why I do these interviews. I want to understand what drives the person that is leading the charge. I want to feel their passion. I want to understand their vision and the strategy that they're going to use to achieve success. That is what these interviews are for. I want to understand the share structure and the cap table, the size of the TAM, the total addressable market. This is the opportunity to learn all of those things. So sit back and enjoy. And if you learn anything from today's interview, do us a favor. Subscribe to the Alpha Wolf Trading YouTube channel. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am not a financial advisor. I recommend highly that before buying any security, speak to a financial advisor and do your own due diligence. Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with a brand new company, brand new CEO, very exciting business. I think absolutely one to put on your radar. And I'll let this gentleman explain what the business is exactly. But the name of the company is Unusual Machines, and the ticker symbol is UMAC, and they are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So, Allan Evans, thanks for coming in and giving us a little background on your company. Why don't you let us know, first of all, give us a little bit of your background and how you got here. What was the attraction to come here? And then give us the rundown on the company itself.
Tim, I appreciate the time. My background, okay. So I was a Silicon Valley startup kid, helped found Avigant. If you ever watched the TV show Silicon Valley, some of the VR prototypes were some of the first headsets I ever built. Spent a bunch of time in China doing manufacturing of headsets. Ended up becoming the CEO of Fat Shark, which builds the goggles for drone racing, or FPV, which a lot of people might have new familiarity with because of the war in Ukraine.
FPV being first person view, right?
Yeah, first person view. So you put on the headset and then you're in the pilot's chair. And that's a lot of what we're seeing in the videos from Ukraine.
Okay.
Or if you've seen drone racing on TV or any of that. Very early on in the COVID pandemic, we joined Red Cat Holdings, and I became the COO and helped do the NASDAQ listing there with Jeff Thompson. And then, as part of our expansion, really, we together went and acquired Teal and then built out Teal production in Salt Lake City. There's sort of domestic production of flying camera drones. They're doing some really interesting work now with the Department of Defense and Border Patrol and a lot of other positives there. As part of the Red Cat journey, we realized we had to sort of separate out some of our consumer stuff and our aerial photography businesses. And so unusual machines ends up being, what somebody had called the spin listing. It was a listing spin out sort of all in one. We listed to the New York in February. And the real what we started with, so where we started, what we were in February is an e-commerce site that sells drone parts to FPV hobbyist pilots, like the greatest customers on the planet. They'll solder stuff. They're almost like the people that go soup up a sports car and take it to the track, but for drones. So like these are the guys that it's an awesome customer base. That e-commerce site sells just a ton of drone parts and finished drones to these customers. We did like 15,000 motors last year, for instance. And now what we realized is, hold on, we sell drone parts, we source drone parts. Why don't we look to do drone part sourcing and production outside of China, because there's a push for it, and then also add some business to business sales with those drone parts. That's basically a high level of just kind of how we got here.
Which you and I talked before we hopped on, that this industry, the drone industry is, in my view, at the infancy stages, right? I mean, we're really just getting started as to the applications that drones can play a role in.
I 100% agree. And I look to parallels for everything because it's, I think, an analogy. So forgive me. Jets were introduced in 1944, 1945 because of conflict. And when there's conflict, people are willing to take more risk with new technologies. So it goes really fast. That introduction to commercial air travel, 1970, we were all flying jets. So I think we're seeing that 1945 jet moment with drones, particularly happening in Europe and very recently in the Middle East. And that's going to result in, I think, much faster sort of civilian use and additional use of these technologies in ways we never expected. Delivery, human transportation, all these sorts of things, I think, just got sped up by about 10 years because of the risk profile that conflict has sort of opened up.
So when you talk about making the drone parts, and I guess, when you say unusual machines, I want to ask you about the name of the company, right? Because drones, when you think of a drone, you think it in the air, flying around, but there's also underwater drones. There's all kinds of different types of drones. There are, the things that are on the ground. I mean, that are, almost like RC cars. I mean, there's all kinds of different types of machines that require the same kinds of parts, right?
Exactly. So you can look at, even the one-wheel skateboards, right? And they look like a drone. They have sort of a balance sensor. They have an electric motor. They have a lithium-ion battery. And when you look at the parts, how people configure them, I think we're going to see more and more interesting applications. But a lot of the same supply chain requirements, regulations, they apply to all the parts for all of these. We given our history, our first focus is on the small flying drones, just because we have a ton of experience in that industry and familiarity. But like anything, just because that's the first market, once there's availability, people acquire all these technologies and start to apply them in ways we can't even imagine yet. I'm kind of excited to find out what that is.
I'm right there with you, man. I think the next 10 years are going to be like, I just remember watching the Jetsons, the cartoon when I was a kid. And it's amazing how many of those things that were in the Jetsons cartoon are actually reality today, right? I mean, it's almost spooky.
Well, yeah. And I mean, every time I look outside, society right now is like 2.5D. We have these giant buildings with elevators, but all the logistics occur in this flat plane. And so you start to think that this will enable cities or society to move to 3D, which I think is going to be really interesting.
You've heard of the line, I'm sure, right? In Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, of course.
right? Tell me that's not crazy. 9 million people living in this. I mean, this what I think it's 126 miles something long. Basically, a city it's just between two walls, right?
Hold on. It's the same thing that we see in society right now. Look at the population in the middle of America, right along the freeway routes versus somewhere else.
Right.
Transportation defines a whole lot of our society. I think you start to look at, and we're moving a little far into the future here, which I appreciate. But if you look at the growth of population centers, et cetera, they're heavily logistics tied. Think about in New York, the cost of property around uh, metro stops or train stops versus the last a mile and a half away from them. And that's where I think the line makes a lot of sense. They looked at the fundamental arteries of how everything flows and said, hold on, this is how it matches for freeways or anything else. Like, it's not a bad idea.
No, it's fascinating to me. It really is fascinating to me. And I think things are going to get more and more interesting. I think we're going to start, seeing drones flying around, dropping off people's food and medical supplies or whatever it is going to be a very common thing, right?
Oh, I think we're definitely going to see that, and the FAA is starting to look at it, and organizations are working on it, and places like Walmart and CVS are doing it, and it makes a lot of sense. So I would say if you believe in that future, it's time to go buy mountaintop property because the logistics accessibility now doesn't require driving up the winding road. So the views would be spectacular. Yeah, I think it's buy up the Mountain West right now. 10 years from now, all those inaccessible places will become the best places to have houses.
That is a really interesting thought that you bring that up, and it's true. I mean, if you don't have to go up that winding road, if you can just straight line up and drop something off, that really changes things dramatically, right?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be fascinating, but at the same time, and we'll get back to drone parts here. I'll tie it
Yeah.
back in. Imagine a delivery drone is flying around. Well, it can't fall out of the sky.
No.
Okay. But it also has to be affordable, easy to maintain, all these other things. What you're going to see, just like with jet engines or automobiles, you're going to see the FAA create a higher level of certification for something to be able to do delivery. So let's say we're building a drone motor. Well, now we have to qualify that motor, test the motor, certify the motor, know how the motor fails, and work with the manufacturers to help indicate that. And so you're going to start to see qualified supply chains. So let's say Skydio, for instance, is going to do a delivery drone. They're not really, or zip line at scale. They're going to want to work with suppliers who qualify their components and then provide the information around it so they can do preventative maintenance, so they can internally identify or do on-start checks to be sure everything's valid so that they stay compliant with the FAA. In these really heavily regulated industries and automotive, current aerospace, stuff that flies, there's a whole set of sort of invisible requirements as customers we don't see that are very important to being sure that everything is done in a way that's safe for the general public. And that forms some of these supply chains and encourages scale. And that's where we see one of the long term, the 10-year time horizons is people don't really go change suppliers once they're qualified and have it all figured out because the risk to the customer and to the end product becomes really high. So we believe in that future, and that's what I would say is our, 10 to 15-year thesis is that we are going to see this delivered. We're going to see everything else, and it's important to start now to work and grow with the people building these things to be sure that the security apparatus and the airspace management and all that stuff are there.
So right now, so as you see it, I mean, right now, do you have do you have a distribution facility, a warehouse? I mean, are you going to have a manufacturing facility? What is the ultimate plan?
So it's a lot of that. Right now, what we do is we do distribution and sourcing but we also do final assembly of some things in Orlando, Florida. And Orlando's great. Love it there. We'd be happy to scale it out. When you look at being a drone parts supplier, whether it's B2C or B2B, it's a combination of things. Maybe we get sub-assemblies from a PCB house and put them together in a final assembly in Orlando to do a camera. We just want to be sure that no matter how we structure our supply chain, it's audited. But then we're trying to move a chunk of the supply chain away from China for governmental regulation reasons. And we need to also still be competitive with the quality and the products that are being offered out of China, or we don't really help the American drone businesses that we're trying to serve. And it's going to be a variety of these different things. Maybe we buy in some pieces, maybe we build some pieces, but supply chains are extremely complicated, right? Nobody owns all the way down to the dirt. Somebody goes to mine the lithium. It's not the same company that makes the battery cells. It's typically not the same company that makes the battery packs. So it's really, we want to sit in there, but then know what it all looks like.
Okay. And how, just for fun, how big is just currently today, without all the things that we were thinking could possibly come, but how big is the drone parts industry today?
So as an example, and it's a little hard to measure, but in 2023, based on some of the reports we read, motors alone for this category of drone was a $3.1 billion industry, right? It's surprisingly large. I'm sure you've gotten a Domino's pizza before, or a Papa John's pizza,
Yeah.
or even a DiGiorno's pizza. What most people don't understand is there's a company called Leprino Farms, it's privately held. It makes mozzarella cheese for all these companies and works to be sure it melts at the right point and matches how they cook pizza. They do about $3 billion worth of pizza cheese a year. You've never heard of them. They don't care if it's Papa John's or Domino's or Pizza Hut or who's doing the Super Bowl commercial. Like, they just quietly make pizza cheese. And so I think with what we have with Unusual Machines, you look and we're not as flashy. It's not as like immediately obvious as like an AeroVironment, because we're not the end product manufacturer for a lot of these other applications outside of first person view hobbyists. But we really look at things like Leprino Farms and pizza cheese as how to build a supply chain business that makes and enables everything else.
What's I think the one benefit that we got from COVID was the fact that it really shined a light on how dependent companies are or were to China, overseas, and for parts and I mean, you got a $10,000, an $80,000 truck sitting on a lot that can't be sold because it's waiting for a $10 part, right?
Correct. And COVID, I think, agree with you. It also, I think, opened up a whole generation's eyes to how complicated and how magical the manufacturing and supply chains are that empower our world, and how fragile they are. And then if we take it one step further, the drone conflict in Ukraine, I think, now made everyone realize how important this is as a class of technology. It has echoes of, the CHIPS Act. It's just a few years behind sort of the discovery of the chips that we didn't want it, and then the banning of Huawei. Now we see the CHIPS Act and like, oh, we have to solve the supply chain issue. For drones, the conflict in Europe sort of went, oh, drones are as important as chips for having domestic production for national security. Okay, we're banning DJI, so it's behind where the CHIPS Act is, but it has strong echoes of that same sort of unanimous attitude that the West has to having something diversified in terms of supply. So that's where we really see the opportunity, is to come in and help build that out, where just like with chips, and in particular with TSMC in Taiwan, being the sole provider, most of the motors, a lot of these parts are definitely all out of China, and they do a great job. So we see that as a real opportunity to help, build and bolster the domestic industry.
And you've got TMC, which is now trying to build a plant here in the United States.
They are.
You got Intel building a plant in the United States. We haven't had a chip plant in the United States in I don't know how long, right? So I think we got 4 or 5 of them cooking right now, and that is a very positive thing in my view, right? So I look at what you're looking at doing. I think it's a massive market opportunity. I don't know what the TAM is on drones. I have no idea, but I do know that when I started looking into drone companies and drones, that it was a very fragmented business. There was no clear leader in my mind other than DJI and if you can tell everybody about what was just passed recently, that impacts DJI and impacts, I mean, you just talked about it, but maybe give us some real clarity on what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, and this is back to the echoes of the CHIP Act. Where we're at with drone legislation right now is in December of last year, so pretty recently, the government, as part of the Defense Authorization Act, which is a huge spending bill for government money, passed the American Securities Drone Act. There's a lot of words in there, you can go read it. But what it basically says is that US government money cannot be used to buy or fly Chinese drones as of January 2026. Right now, if you're a government agency, a lot of them, when they need drone services, they go contract it out. So they'd go hire, Tim's contracting service. You go fly whatever you want to get them the data back. And right now, a lot of those contractors are flying DJI drones because candidly, they do a great job at a reasonable price. In 2026, those contract companies won't be able to even take that government contract money to go fly a Chinese drone, even if they already own it. And so then let's say you do 30% government work, you're going to be motivated to go change over your fleet to US drones. That way you can continue to do government work, and you don't want to do 3 different ecosystems, right? Then you'd have to train your team. What a pain in the butt. And we believe that this is the midterm driver for the value for us, is we're trying to get in place to be a second source for a lot of the companies that are domestic, whether it's Teal, which is Red Cat, which we know pretty well, having come from there, or several others. And if we can be a provider for those organizations, we think that in late 25, you're going to see stuff like the CHIPS Act, where the government goes, oh, we banned everything, but, we don't have domestic supply. Let's throw some money at domestic supply. And I think we'll see that really turn on cost, performance, returns for a lot of the American drone manufacturing companies that are already there. So if we can be there as a supplier by then, that's absolutely the midterm sort of value thesis for what we're doing.
To me, it's perfect timing. I mean, it's just.
I think so too.
Yeah. So let's talk about some specifics with the company. You got fully diluted. How many shares outstanding?
Just under 10 million.
Okay, which is nothing.
Nothing.
All right, and you just listed, so I'm going to assume that you're pretty good on cash.
Yeah, we're pretty good on cash, and we are extremely scrappy. So we went to just for a little anecdote, we care about cash flow. We went to ring the bell in New York. Everybody paid for their own way to go. There wasn't a corporate expense because we don't celebrate raising money. We only celebrate making money. Now, it was a great event. Appreciate everyone being there, but that's our corporate attitude, is to go after it. And, we're really focused. I think if you're going to measure us quarter to quarter to quarter, and it'll be a little hard in the next couple of quarters because of the acquisition costs and the IPO costs, cash flow. Is cash flow, go top line and then go cash flow. I think with GAAP, with hardware companies, sometimes it's hard to say, P&Ls because is there equity? What's your working capital changes look like? If you wanted to measure my performance and the quality of our job, you'd say, okay, is cash flow getting better or worse? And I think that's what we're entirely focused on. So, yeah, but we're fine there. And when you talk about 10 million shares outstanding, if you go look at the chart and you want to talk about low float and opportunities that caused me to scratch my head, there was a runner there for a minute where we went up to $6 a share, right? Because there's some volatility potential for where we're sitting for sure.
Okay. So as I look at it, I mean, you guys chose a very challenging time. The worst I've seen in the small micro cap space in 35 years. It's really has been the most. It's the duration of how long this has lasted that it's just, and it doesn't seem to matter what news somebody has. The stock might pop for an hour, and by the end of the day, it's down. I mean, it's really news hasn't mattered. You got 7 companies basically that are taking the markets to new highs with valuations that are absolutely, in my opinion, insane, right? So Apple could buy 17 countries right now, $3 trillion valuation. Is it going to go to 6? To get a double, you need it to go to 6 trillion, right? What the hell is going to drive Apple to 6 trillion for a double? Double is not even that great, in my opinion, right? I'm looking at, and the reason I'm in the micro cap and small cap space is because that's where you can get 100 baggers, right? That's where you can get, 50 baggers, and that's not being unrealistic. That's very real. It's more real now today than it's ever been because of how badly the companies have been beaten up. If you're executing and you have managed to survive a pandemic, which we've never had before in history, a supply chain issue that was historic in nature, and the fastest interest rate hike cycle in the history of mankind. If you have been able to grow your business through all of that, and you're not just surviving, but you're thriving, you should be rewarded for that. And right now, no one is getting rewarded on Wall Street. It's just been a painful 36-month run, right?
So there's some positives, I guess, in all that, maybe. Our consumer division's been growing 30% year over year. So we've managed to do that through this, which is great. But also, when it's this painful, there's less competition. So we can establish a market position without having to fend off people who can just burn money in a free money era. And we're forced to build a business model that the second this thing scales, it kicks out cash. So I think what it does is it forces discipline and execution. It thins out the weeds, and
Right.
it lets you.
This is a cleansing for sure.
Yeah, but in a cleansing, if you can survive the cleansing, when you come around, your business model's there, your ability to execute, your internal sort of cash discipline is there. It's not the heydays, heavy spend days. It's, once it turns on, it turns on and can really return to shareholders. So we see it as an opportunity to position ourselves. And, if we really focus on the transition to adding this B2B segment and we're successful at it and we're well positioned, then when this goes, it'll go all at once. And it could go much sooner even than late next summer with the American manufacturers, because if you look how these drone parts are sort of being unofficially qualified, there's the blue UAS list by the Department of Defense. And so one of the things I'd say is if we're executing successfully and you start to see our parts show up there, then that we've made American-made parts, but you also know that defense customers can then freely buy them. And that includes, maybe overseas sales to the manufacturers in Europe, or to the US Department of Defense that's looking for it. So again, if I'm saying, okay, are these guys able to actually hit what they say? The first thing I look for is announcements around us actually getting the audit to be Blue UAS for a part or two, or other indicators like that. And then you would know that we had gotten the tickets or the certifications necessary to really start to succeed with that B2B partnership.
So let me ask you a real quick question, just for clarity. The US, so it can't be a China drone, right, that you're flying.
Yep.
What if it's a US manufactured drone, but it's got some China parts in it? Is that?
That's okay, depending on what the parts are.
Okay.
So there's very complicated set of rules in the NDAA, and we know what they are. And over time, those change. So right now, for instance, motors are fine. They can be Chinese motors, not a problem. But we believe that as the supply chain gets more and more mature, that the number of things that are restricted will increase, or the amount of components out of China, the type of components out of China will become tighter. Now, so we're not trying to jump all the way to the end all at once, but we are definitely trying to stay in front of the regulatory curve, because our customers deserve us to be aware of it so they don't have to think about it. Right? That's why people should come to us and be like, we need this performance at this price with this requirement. And we'd say, sure. But parts get designed in, and then those products don't normally show up for another year. So we have to anticipate what the requirements are going to be in a year for us now as part of the supply chain. And we're doing a pretty good job of that. And that's where some of that, the Blue UAS qualification is maybe a formal signaling that we have succeeded in it and gotten the stamp of approval to be integrated in a lot of these other devices.
All right, so you've already got an online site, and you've got also Rotor Riot, right? Which is YouTube. If you've never seen Rotor Riot, you got to go check it out on YouTube because it's badass. I mean, some crazy drone flying over there.
But the very first episode was filmed in Chernobyl in Ukraine.
Unbelievable flying. I mean, these guys
awesome.
Just mind blowing how they can control these things. But Rotor Riot, but you've also got that online retail, right? And then you've got Fat Chart, which is so in revs. What are you doing in revenue right now?
We split it up a little bit. We look at what we're selling sort of B2C and drone parts. It was around $5 million last year, and it's been growing, like I said, 30% year over year.
Okay. And so right now you've got a $14 million market cap.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And you have this how big is the TAM on the market right now?
Well, the TAM on the drone parts market is in the billions of dollars. Right. Just motors alone is $3 billion. You add motors, flight controllers, and that's the TAM today, not the TAM as the market expands.
Right.
So it's big enough.
It's big enough, and you know, I think that you guys are gonna take some share, right?
You know, we're going after it.
Yeah, 14 million just seems like, to me, seems like a pretty small number.
Yeah, so I come out of venture, right? A venture capital initially as a operator. If you think about it, this looks kind of like a publicly available venture investment, right? You know, you could say, okay, are they going to make it work? And or maybe we're at the Series Seed round where it's, you know, higher risk, higher return with the big multiples that you see. And as we start to demonstrate these things and, you know, our value changes, it might look like a Series A investment. And I think what's really great about this is you don't see these sorts of opportunities outside of maybe biotech in the public markets that often. And what we're excited about is by being in the public markets, we're able to, you know, let people invest in this thing and not just let the VCs drive it till it's $300 million, $400 million, and then go list it and have you like Reddit, right?
Right.
You weren't able to publicly invest in Reddit when it was, you know, $15 million. You had to wait till it was $6 billion. And so some other people get to go make all the money.
Right. Right.
That's not fair.
It's not fair. And it's funny, Wall Street has done a really good job over the, of teaching retail investors to stay away from low price stocks. Because
Yep.
well, low price stocks are bad. They're low price for a reason. They're not good companies. That's a bunch of bullshit. I mean, there are low price stocks, low price that are unbelievable companies. Apple at one time was 25 cents, I think. Right? I mean, they don't come out of the chute. They're not all these huge mammoth successful companies. What Wall Street needs is retail investors to buy those high price stocks so that Wall Street can sell those high price stocks and collect the profits. That's what they need retail for.
Well, I think a lot of those companies are great companies. Apple's a great company.
Well,
Microsoft's
they
a great
are.
company. They do great stuff. But what I think, how I look at it at least, is expected value. Right? If you look at what we're doing and you said, oh, hey, this could be 100 bagger, could go to zero, what's your expected value? And what's your time horizon? And this, I think companies like ours look a lot more like an investment rather than a trade. Traders are great too. Liquidity is awesome. I'm not fussed, but it's one of those, do you believe in the fundamental thesis? Do you believe in the team? Are you paying attention to execution? And then do you trust that they're going the direction they're going with a little bit of thoughtfulness? And I think, right now, people are buying a little higher risk profile, a little higher reward profile. And as we start to hit our milestones, that might change. People might average up. They might, buy a share now and roll in later. They might finally say, oh, okay, it's the right time to take a position because these guys are actually doing it. All those people are great. I don't want to encourage anyone to do anything outside of their thesis, but I do agree that this is that high expected value, high expected risk sort of category. I'm fine with that. That's just the truth.
I love it. I love it. So look, I love the fact that I got you to come on early, because this is in my view, this is the beginning, man. I mean, this is early innings, right?
We are just getting started. And I think we're getting started in a market and in a domestic market driven by legislation that is just getting started. And I think the evolution of it over the next 6 months, because that's the government buy cycle through September, and the government decided not to pass a budget for 6 months. So now everybody inside the government has to decide their drone spend allocations in about a 3-month time window. So I think you're going to see that. And then I think you're going to see the American securities drone impacts next summer, and you see some of the conflicts. This is, it's a brand new paradigm, very similar to the CHIPS Act and the other things being passed, driving real value shifts in where those things are being done. And it's real fun to be part of. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to see where it goes.
It's so exciting because you do have a definitive catalyst come 2026, and you know about it now. I mean, that's the reality of it. And you've got a lot of time to position the company really well, right? In that.
No, I wouldn't say a lot of time. We have just enough time.
Yeah. Okay.
Barely just enough time, but we have enough time.
Allan, I absolutely love it. This is what I'd like to do, man. I'd like, when you have when you have something that you feel is significant, that comes up, is worthy of, expanding upon beyond just a press release, right? We'll have you back. And
I think this summer that'd be great. And as I said, if I was paying attention to us, I'd look for proof that we're starting to execute through either a couple B2B contract announcements or us getting one of those components on the blue list. Those are the next two, if you're paying attention, milestones. So if you went out and bought one share today and you wanted to see if we were right, that's what you'd track for. And I think when that happens, we'd love to, either myself or Drew, who'd be doing the work, would love to chat with you then.
You are the first CEO that has ever said what you just said, which was, you want to go out and buy one share today. And you know what? So what are you risking? You're risking $1.50.
Yeah, $1.50. And your mind space reading a headline once a week, right? Like,
And why do you do that, right? So do you guys have email alerts also?
we do, and you can sign up for the email alerts. But I just know, like, if you sit there and stare at it for a second, and you take, you're a little more interested. That's all.
You know, it's funny. I always take a little piece, but when I start to get involved, I always take a little piece. I sign up for the email alerts too. Sometimes you get bombarded by so many email alerts from so many companies. It's tough to go through them all. But when it's in your account, your brokerage account, naturally you just pay more attention, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're just reminded of it. And then if
Right.
something happens, you go check the news and you're like, oh, they're executing. And I'm like, that's all. That's all I'm going to encourage people to do. Like, I understand where we're at. I understand any hesitancy. There's just one share. I'd like to when this interview goes out, I'd like to see, 1,000 buys for one share. I can see that. Just check level 2 and just see all these real tiny bids. It'd make my day. I'd be pumped. It would,
Well, we should try to make that happen for you, Alan. You know what I
yeah.
mean? If we can't do that, that's pretty sad.
Well, that's
All
what
right,
I'm here
listen.
for, but we're not going to ask for more than that. Just to be honest, just start a relationship.
Yep.
First date. That's all I'd call it.
I love it, man. I love it. I really do. I'm looking forward to following this story. I think this is going to be a fun one. So I appreciate you coming in and taking the time, and we will absolutely have you back as things progress.
No problem, and I promise it'll be fun. That's one thing I can actually guarantee.
All right, Alan. Hold on one second. I'm going to shut this off.
No problem.
Thank you for tuning in to another CEO interview here at Alpha Wolf Trading. Today we had Allan Evans from Unusual Machines, ticker symbol UMAC. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? Make sure you smash that subscribe button. All of those things are very important to us here at Alpha Wolf Trading, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Trading wishes you the very best of success.